The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the narrow roads of Kent into ribbons of mud and mist. Inside a modest country house that had once belonged to a prosperous family, Arabella Hastings sat beside the drawing-room window, carefully mending the sleeve of an old coat. Only a few years earlier, the Hastings name had commanded respect. Now, mounting debts and failed investments had reduced the family to a shadow of its former standing. Since her father's death, Arabella had spent every day fighting to preserve what little remained. A sharp knock echoed through the house. Arabella looked up. Their elderly maid hurried to answer the door and returned moments later carrying a sealed letter. "For you, Miss Hastings." Arabella accepted it with curiosity. The paper was thick and expensive, stamped with a crest she immediately recognized. Beaumont. Her heartbeat quickened. Everyone in England knew the Beaumont name. More specifically, everyone knew the name of its master, Duke Alaric Beaumont. The stories surrounding him were endless. Some called him brilliant. Others called him merciless. Most simply feared him. Arabella broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The message was brief. She was requested to travel immediately to Beaumont Manor regarding a matter of employment. Transportation would be provided. Employment. The word alone made her pause. She had quietly searched for respectable work for months, hoping to support her widowed mother without sacrificing her dignity. Opportunities for women of noble birth were limited, but necessity often ignored pride. By afternoon, a black carriage arrived at the Hastings estate. Her mother squeezed her hand before she departed. "Whatever happens," Mrs. Hastings said softly, "remember who you are." Arabella smiled. "I always will." The journey lasted several hours. As the carriage climbed a winding road through dense woods, Beaumont Manor emerged from the fog. It looked less like a residence and more like a fortress. Dark stone walls stretched across the hillside. Towering windows reflected the gray sky. The sheer scale of the estate seemed designed to intimidate visitors before they ever crossed the threshold. Arabella suddenly understood why people spoke of the Duke with such caution. A servant escorted her through vast corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Eventually, she was shown into a study. The room was silent except for the crackling fireplace. A tall man stood near the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He turned. Arabella instantly recognized him. Duke Alaric Beaumont. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair and sharp features that seemed carved from stone. His expression revealed nothing. Those cold gray eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. For several moments, neither spoke. Then he nodded once. "Miss Hastings." "Your Grace." "Sit." The command was polite in wording but firm in tone. Arabella obeyed. The Duke remained standing. "I understand you are seeking employment." "Yes, Your Grace." "Good." A strange silence followed. Arabella waited for him to explain the position. Instead, he crossed the room and stopped directly in front of her. "I need a wife before sunset." She blinked. For a moment she wondered if she had misheard him. "A wife," she repeated. "Yes." Arabella stared. Surely this was some bizarre joke. Yet the Duke's expression remained perfectly serious. "I was informed that I was being considered for employment." "You are." His answer only deepened her confusion. Alaric moved toward his desk and retrieved a document. "My grandfather's will contain a condition. If I remain unmarried after sunset today, a significant portion of the Beaumont inheritance transfers to distant relatives." Arabella struggled to process what she was hearing. "And you expect me to solve this problem?" "I do." The bluntness of his reply irritated her. "Your Grace, marriage is not a business arrangement. Everything is a business arrangement." His cold certainty sent a flash of anger through her. Arabella rose from her chair. "Then I fear you have wasted both our time." She turned toward the door. "Your family's debts total nearly £12,000. Her steps halted instantly. Slowly, she faced him again. Alaric's gaze never wavered. "The mortgage on your estate is overdue." Arabella felt her stomach tighten. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things." The answer was neither boastful nor apologetic. Simply factual. He continued, "If you marry me, every debt will be paid." Arabella remained silent. "The Hastings estate will remain yours." Silence. "Your mother will never worry about creditors again." The words struck deeper than she wished to admit. For months, she had watched her mother hide letters demanding payment. She had seen servants dismissed because there was no money to keep them. She had lain awake wondering how long they had before losing everything. Alaric allowed the silence to linger. "You need security," he said. "I need a wife." Arabella hated how logical the arrangement sounded. "What happens after the wedding? You become Duchess of Beaumont. And you expect nothing else?" For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Weariness. Only cooperation. The answer surprised her. There was no romance in his proposal. No promises. No affection. Just honesty. Brutal honesty. A clock somewhere within the manor began striking the hour. Alaric glanced toward the sound. Time was running out. Arabella realized that beneath his calm exterior, even the feared Duke felt pressure. The inheritance mattered, perhaps more than he wished to reveal. Minutes passed. Her future balanced between two impossible choices: leave and watch her family's ruin continue, or marry a man she barely knew. Finally, she lifted her chin. "If I agree, my mother is protected?" "Completely. And the estate remains ours?" "Yes." Arabella took a slow breath. Every instinct urged caution. Yet necessity left little room for alternatives. "Very well, Your Grace." For the first time since entering the room, Alaric seemed genuinely surprised. "You accept?" "I do." The Duke extended his hand. A strange gesture for a proposal, yet perfectly suited to him. After a brief hesitation, Arabella placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, neither warm nor cold, simply certain. Outside, the sun was sinking beyond the horizon. Within the hour, they would be husband and wife. And as Arabella followed the Duke from the study toward a future she could neither predict nor escape, she could not shake the feeling that she had just stepped into the center of a story far larger and far more dangerous than she understood. Arabella became Duchess of Beaumont before the church candles had burned halfway down. The ceremony itself was brief, witnessed only by a handful of servants and the family solicitor. There had been no celebration, no music, and no promises beyond those required by law. The following morning, Arabella awoke in Beaumont Manor as the wife of England's most feared duke. The realization felt no less strange in daylight. Over the next several days, she struggled to find her place within the vast estate. The manor seemed to operate with military precision. Servants moved quietly through the corridors, speaking only when necessary. Whenever Duke Alaric entered a room, conversations stopped immediately. It was not respect alone. It was fear. Arabella noticed it everywhere. Yet she could not reconcile that fear with the man she had married. Alaric remained distant but never cruel. He ensured her mother was comfortably settled and personally fulfilled every promise he had made. The Hastings debts disappeared within days, and ownership of the family estate was secured. A ruthless man would not have bothered. The contradiction intrigued her. One afternoon, while exploring the manor's west wing, Arabella discovered a heavy oak door secured with an iron lock. She paused. Several nearby rooms stood open, yet this one remained sealed. Curiosity stirred. When she later asked a servant about it, the woman immediately lowered her eyes. "I know nothing about that room, Your Grace." The answer came too quickly. Arabella knew evasion when she heard it. As days passed, other peculiar details emerged. Letters arrived regularly for Alaric, many marked confidential. Visitors often came after dark. Meetings occurred behind closed doors. Whenever Arabella approached, conversations ended. The entire manor seemed wrapped in layers of secrecy. One evening, she entered the library and found Alaric seated alone before the fireplace. A thick ledger rested open on his lap. His expression appeared unusually tired. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Arabella gathered her courage. "May I ask you something?" Alaric glanced up. "You usually do." The faint trace of humor surprised her. She sat opposite him. Why is everyone so afraid of you? His eyes returned to the fire. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Finally, he answered, because fear is useful. Arabella frowned. Useful. It prevents betrayal. The words carried a weight that caught her attention. Before she could respond, Alaric closed the ledger. There was a time when I trusted people. Something in his voice made her listen carefully. My father trusted family, business partners, friends. His jaw tightened. They ruined him. Arabella remained silent. He lost everything before he died. For the first time, she saw genuine pain beneath his controlled exterior. The people responsible suffered consequences. The statement was calm, too calm. Suddenly, countless rumors about the Duke began making sense. Perhaps he had earned his fearsome reputation while protecting what remained of his family's legacy. Not because he enjoyed cruelty, but because he refused to be vulnerable again. The realization changed something within her. Later that week, another discovery deepened her confusion. While reviewing estate records, Arabella found documents showing large donations made anonymously to orphanages across England. Additional payments supported injured veterans and struggling tenant families. Every contribution originated from Beaumont accounts. The benefactor was obvious. Yet Alaric had never mentioned any of it. When she confronted him, he appeared almost annoyed. Those records were private. You help hundreds of people. That is hardly remarkable. Arabella stared. Most wealthy men ensured the world knew of their generosity. Alaric seemed determined to hide his. Why keep a secret? Because gratitude is unnecessary. His answer left her speechless. Bit by bit, the terrifying Duke of public rumor began to crumble. In his place stood a man burdened by old wounds and impossible responsibilities. A man who trusted almost no one. A man who carried his loneliness behind walls stronger than Beaumont Manor itself. As the weeks passed, conversation between them became easier. Arabella challenged him when she disagreed. Alaric listened more often than she expected. For the first time since their marriage, genuine companionship began to emerge. Then everything changed. One rainy evening, Arabella entered the study searching for a book. The room appeared empty. As she crossed toward the shelves, a folded paper lying beside the desk caught her attention. She recognized Alaric's name immediately. Without thinking, she picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page. The message contained no signature, only a warning. You were never meant to keep the inheritance. The marriage changes nothing. What belongs to us will soon be reclaimed. A chill ran through her. Before she could read further, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Arabella quickly replaced the note. Moments later, Alaric entered. The instant he noticed her expression, his eyes narrowed. What happened? She hesitated. Then she told him about the letter. His face hardened. Not with surprise, with recognition. You've seen these before, Arabella said. Yes. Who sent them? I don't know. She doubted that answer. More importantly, so did he. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Alaric moved to the desk and picked up the note. This is precisely why fear is useful. Arabella shook her head. No, fear creates enemies. His gaze met hers. And trust creates opportunities for betrayal. The argument lingered between them, neither willing to surrender. Yet beneath the disagreement, Arabella sensed something else. Concern. Not for himself, for her. Because whoever was sending the letters clearly knew about the marriage, and clearly resented it. That night, long after the manor had fallen silent, Arabella sat alone in her room, reviewing everything she had learned. The inheritance deadline, the sudden marriage, the anonymous threats, the hidden tension throughout Beaumont Manor. One possibility kept returning. What if the inheritance crisis had never been accidental? What if someone had deliberately engineered the situation to force Alaric into an impossible corner? The thought refused to leave her. As rain battered the windows, Arabella stared into the darkness beyond the glass. Somewhere within the Beaumont family, an enemy was waiting. Someone intelligent, someone patient, someone who had been planning for a very long time. And for reasons she could not yet explain, Arabella was beginning to believe that her marriage to the Duke had placed her directly in that person's path. Arabella could not ignore her suspicions. The anonymous threats, the inheritance clause, and the tension that lingered over Beaumont Manor all pointed toward a single conclusion. Someone within the Beaumont family had orchestrated everything. The question was why. Determined to uncover the truth, she began examining old family records stored in the manor archives. Days of careful searching revealed a troubling pattern. Several legal documents had been altered shortly before the deadline that forced Alaric to marry. The changes appeared minor, yet together they created the very crisis that had nearly cost him a large portion of his inheritance. Someone had planned it with remarkable precision. One evening, Arabella finally found the name connected to every suspicious document. Lord Cedric Beaumont, Alaric's cousin, a trusted relative, a man welcomed freely into the manor. The discovery sent a chill through her. Cedric had everything to gain if Alaric lost control of the inheritance. More importantly, he had been present during every critical moment leading to the deadline. Arabella immediately went to find her husband. She located him in the study. When she presented the evidence, Alaric read each page in silence. His expression darkened. "No," he said quietly. Arabella frowned. "The documents are clear." "I know. Then what is it?" Alaric stared at the final page. "Cedric grew up with me." The betrayal clearly cut deeper than he wished to admit. For years, he had believed his cousin was one of the few people he could trust. Now, even that certainty was crumbling. "We need proof strong enough that he cannot deny it," Arabella said. Alaric slowly nodded. For the first time since their marriage, they faced a challenge together rather than separately. The following week, they carefully gathered evidence. Financial records disappeared from Cedric's office. Witnesses were quietly questioned. Letters were traced. Piece by piece, the conspiracy emerged. Cedric had manipulated legal paperwork, spread damaging rumors, and secretly encouraged rival claimants to challenge Alaric's inheritance. The marriage itself had disrupted his plans. That was why the threats continued. Arabella had become an obstacle. Unfortunately, Cedric soon realized they were closing in. One stormy evening, Arabella was returning from the archives when footsteps echoed behind her in the deserted corridor. She turned. No one stood there. The corridor was empty, yet a feeling of danger settled over her. Moments later, a heavy decorative vase crashed from a balcony above, shattering exactly where she had been standing seconds earlier. Arabella froze. The accident had been no accident. Someone wanted her silenced. When Alaric learned what happened, his composure vanished. For perhaps the first time in years, genuine fear crossed his face. Not fear for himself, fear for her. That realization affected Arabella more deeply than she expected. The walls surrounding the Duke were finally beginning to crack. The next morning, Alaric gathered several influential solicitors and family representatives at Beaumont Manor. Cedric arrived looking perfectly confident. He greeted everyone with polite charm. For a moment, Arabella understood how easily others had been deceived. The confrontation began calmly. Alaric presented financial records. Cedric dismissed them. Witness statements followed. Cedric denied every accusation. Then Arabella produced the final piece of evidence, a collection of letters written in Cedric's own hand. The room fell silent. The letters detailed payments, instructions, and plans concerning the inheritance scheme. There was no room for doubt. Cedric's confidence evaporated. His face turned pale. "You were supposed to lose everything," he snapped at Alaric. Years of resentment suddenly poured from him. "Everything was meant to be mine." The confession stunned the room. Alaric said nothing. He simply watched as the truth destroyed the illusion his cousin had carefully maintained. Within the hour, legal authorities were summoned. Cedric's influence collapsed as quickly as it had risen. For the first time in years, the threat hanging over Beaumont Manor disappeared. That evening, silence returned to the estate. Not the uneasy silence of secrets, the peaceful silence of relief. Arabella stood alone in the manor gardens as the sun dipped toward the horizon, the same kind of sunset that had witnessed their hurried marriage months earlier. Footsteps approached behind her. She knew immediately who it was. Alaric stopped beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "When I asked you to marry me, I believed it was a solution to a problem." Arabella smiled faintly. It certainly sounded that way. A rare hint of amusement appeared in his eyes. Then his expression softened. But somewhere along the way, the problem ceased to matter. Arabella turned toward him. The man standing beside her no longer resembled the cold duke she had first met. The fear remained. The strength remained. But now she could see the heart hidden beneath both. "You changed everything," he said quietly. She felt her breath catch. "I spent years believing trust was weakness." His gaze never left hers. "You proved I was wrong." The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. This was not the ruthless duke speaking. This was simply Alaric, a man finally allowing himself to be vulnerable. "I love you, Arabella." The words were simple, yet they carried more meaning than any grand speech. Arabella smiled through tears she had not realized were forming. "I love you too." The confession felt wonderfully inevitable. What had begun as a bargain born of desperation had become something far stronger, something real. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Alaric gently took her hand. Months earlier, he had offered security. Now he offered his heart. Together, they watched the fading light settle over Beaumont Manor. The estate no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. And though neither of them could know what challenges the future might bring, they would face them side by side. For England's most feared duke had finally discovered something stronger than fear: love.